The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, if someone came up to you and offered 8 years, $128 million to continue working wherever you were working at the time, whether it's the Athletic, CJ Show, whatever, how fast would you sign that contract?
Oh, man. Can you even put yourself in Kirill Kaprizov's shoes or skates? Can you imagine? No. Maybe another way to reframe it is if someone came up to you in whatever line of work you do, dear listener, wherever you are out there, and said, we're going to make you the highest paid person at that thing you do by a significant amount, the highest that's ever been paid, how quickly would you sign that? Let's face it, the contract would be signed if I was in that room. Mm-hmm. But for all kinds of reasons, you and I are not in that room getting that kind of offer. And it's what makes this, to me, such a compelling. We've got this situation, so many NHL stars with sort of uncertain futures, which we've been discussing this month. But this might be the most interesting of them all, because here you have a player who turned down that amount of money. And what does it mean? I don't think it's exactly clear yet.
When I hear that story, I wonder, does he want to stay in Minnesota? Is it about term? Does he want more money? Does he want more of his cap hit to reflect a higher percentage of the salary cap structure in Minnesota? I know it's not clear, but I have so many questions about what that could all mean. I mean, Minnesota is prepared, as you mentioned, to make him the richest player in the league. So why wouldn't Kirill Kaprizov want that?
Well, here's what I can tell you for sure, because I've seen, some conversation and speculation out there. It's my belief and understanding that Kirill Kaprizov wants to sign a long-term contract. And I've seen some people say, well, maybe he just wants to do a short deal and then he can really cash in a couple years' time. I don't think that is where his mind's at. I mean, look at his age, right? I believe he's 29. Coming off a season that he missed half the year due to injury. He had some real struggles with his hip last year. And so I think it behooves him, quite frankly, where he's one of these players in this window where you can still get an 8-year contract for the next year, to sign that and to be guaranteed that kind of money. So, I'm working on the understanding that he wants a long-term deal. But at the same time, this is where it's almost a bit of a paradox. I'm also hearing there's still some amount of optimism that he signs with the Minnesota Wild and that they feel that this is not the end of the story, the fact that he's turned down this contract. And so I don't know in the total back and forth of the negotiation, what needs to happen to get them from where they are now to get them where he's signing that kind of deal and he's becoming the richest player in NHL history with the Wild. But that does, at least at this time, still seem to be on the table with Kaprizov. And, I'll remind everyone that usually these negotiations need a kind of a pressure point. It's not a real deadline, the start of camp, but the start of camp is a symbolic start because, a lot of players want to, when possible, get all their business done before the official playing of the season begins. And so we've still got a bit of a window here where I think that there's a possibility to still see him sign in Minnesota, but the numbers are staggering, Julian. And you can only sign 20% is the maximum any player can get, but it's actually of this year's cap for next season if you're signing right now, which, translates to the fact the most any player can sign right now for is $19.1 million a year. Like Kaprizov with a $16 million offer is getting pretty close to the absolute max he could get. And when you consider, okay, yeah, he could leave as a free agent, you can only get a 7-year contract. And if you're working off that $19 million number, it's hard, basically the $128 million on 7 years is $18.25 million. I don't mean to load everyone up with too much math here, but the point is that there's almost not much more room for him to make more money in the offer that was already on the table. So, I think the Wild are going to stick at this at least until, they get maybe a clear indication he doesn't want to be there, because I don't believe that's happened yet. I mean, the time that this story dropped was Frank Saravalli earlier in the week, who broke this news. But when it broke, Kirill Kaprizov was on the ice at a captain's skate in Minnesota with his teammates. Can you imagine what it must have been like when they all came off the ice afterwards? And, inevitably, I'm sure people look at their phones and see that news, exploding around the league. And That must have been kind of a weird room, because everyone's thinking like your initial question of this episode. That would be a tough amount of money to say no to. I think no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you've accomplished.
Imagine sitting next to Kirill in the locker. You pull out your phone, you see the report, you just look at him like, you turned down what?
Right.
That's what I would do.
Then your second line would be like, and you're paying for Chipotle today, because if you're turning down that kind of money, you must have even more money than I knew. You're getting lunch.
Oh, to your great work on this so far. If I'm a Minnesota Wild fan, hearing you talk about this story, the very first thing that comes to mind is that any of these other reports that say that, oh, maybe he might want to trade, or maybe the Minnesota Wild are actually asking for his trade list, I feel as if that's not in the cards right now. Am I interpreting that wrong?
Well, you're not interpreting wrong. No, I mean, I think it could still end up there, right? I mean, if it gets to a point where the Wild believe or know definitively that he's not going to sign with them, well, then they do have a decision to make, right? They have an ability to, he's got the trade protection. So it's sort of a similar situation to what the Maple Leafs faced last year with Mitch Marner, but they would have to negotiate to a team that he would want to waive to, and who knows how that would all go. But we're not there yet is really what I'm saying is there's still a feeling that this negotiation is alive, and that there's still an opportunity perhaps to get a deal done. I think Kaprizov likes Minnesota, and, as much as you might say, okay, someone might pay him that $19 million, I almost counter and say who. I think the Wild are actually incentivized here to pay him more than anyone could pay him on the market. I mean, he's a franchise superstar for a franchise that's been around a long time, has not won a playoff series in a long time, is knocking on the door of doing that in part because they have Kirill Kaprizov, but they also have a pretty good young team there, and other players sign long-term. So, while we can start to get into the game that, oh yeah, everyone wants to play in New York or everyone wants to go down to Florida, I just don't see any of those teams going at a level that would surpass that total amount of money. And it's not because of the player's talent. It's just, everybody's trying, anyone who would be signing him is trying to win a Stanley Cup. And it would be hard to imagine a team that's a real cup contender being able to stretch themselves that far, even with the cap the cap, as we know, is going to surge here. But, there's almost limits to that. I think ultimately when it comes time for Connor McDavid to do a deal, or Jack Eichel, some of these other players that are in the same spot as Kaprizov as potential UFAs in 2026, as much as they're all going to try to maximize their earning power, I don't see anyone getting to 17 million. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 17 is the number for someone like McDavid, but I can't imagine it going much farther than that right now in the short term, because, it does limit what the team can do around you. And, I guess what's $1 million between friends if you're making 16 or 17 or 18? There is a limit to that amount of thinking. So look, we are definitely, I'm sure you saw James Myrtle's piece this week in The Athletic. We're getting to the era where there will be a $20 million NHL player, but I still think it's 3 to 4 years down the road here. And certainly anyone signing a long-term deal right now, I just don't see them. I don't see them, frankly, getting much more than what Kirill Kaprizov was just offered.
I mean, to your point, the fact that the idea of Kirill Kaprizov being the first super max or just max player on a max contract with like a 19, that's what I feel like at this point now. This is really what he might want. I could totally see a scenario where he's like, you know what? If I'm going to be here, I'm going to be that guy. Give me as much money as I can. Give me the 19.1 million, and I can be that max, be on that max contract.
Right, and it's an interesting dynamic because the Wild know how important he is to them. And that's you can go to his HockeyDB page and you're judging that on stats, but you're also judging that on star power, right? Relevance. The fact that they haven't had, Marian Gaborik a long, long time ago was a pretty electric player for them early in his career. He left as a free agent, and that's something that still stung the organization. I think that, they see this, and Craig Leopold has been pretty open, the Wild's owner, even going back a year. He's made public comments that no one will pay, no one's going to be able to pay him more than us. And like, he's almost, by doing so, he's really probably made the negotiation part of this a little harder, but he's done that because, first of all, I think he believes it. And second, he's sending a signal to his fan base. Like, this this isn't going to break down because we got cheap. This is we know how great this guy is. We value him. At a certain point, I think you do have to take into account what else, what the ramifications are for the rest of the team building process if you pay him at a certain level. But even the fact they went to $60 million, I mean, Leon Draisaitl, like, look at his career accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost track of how many 50-goal seasons, 100-point seasons, a Hart Trophy, multiple Rocket Richard trophies. In the playoffs every year, it seems he's scoring like 1.5 points per game. He just got 14 million times 8 now. We didn't know. We knew the cap was going up when he signed that deal. That was last September 3rd, just a little bit more than a year from where we sit now. But we didn't have the exact parameters. Now there's parameters being put out there by the league and the PA with the CBA extension. And, I think we just have to get used to players making a lot more money. But this is the first guy potentially, especially if he signs for that deal. Although I do think, Jack Eichel, he's going to be out there and you can be sure he knows what Leon Draisaitl makes. He's won a Stanley Cup in Vegas. He's going to be pushing for that kind of money. So, I don't know where the dam breaks exactly, because I think that it's a hard time to basically do a deal around the league. But I do believe one or more of that group of players is going to sign here in the near future before camps get open. I'd put pretty, as I sort of handicap it, I'd say don't rule out Kaprizov. And certainly I could see Jack Eichel re-upping with the Vegas Golden Knights, in the near future. I just think it's such a priority on both sides of that negotiation to get something done.
This episode of The Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Have you ever browsed in incognito mode? It's probably not as incognito as you think. Google recently settled a $5 billion lawsuit after being accused of secretly tracking users in incognito mode. Google's defense was, incognito does not mean invisible. In fact, all of your online activity is still 100% visible to a ton of third parties, unless you use ExpressVPN. Without ExpressVPN, these third parties can still see every website you visit, even in incognito mode. ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure, encrypted servers, so third parties can't see your browsing history. It hides your IP address, it's easy to use, and it works on all devices. When I'm out in a hotel, I'm traveling, for my job, going either to Florida, to Vancouver, doesn't matter where I'm at. I very much appreciate ExpressVPN not exposing all of my data to all these random third parties so they can see what Christmas gift I'd like to give producer Drew. Because even underneath all of his bad takes, he deserves love. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Johnston. That's expressvpn.com/Johnston. And you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/Johnston. I would very much like to get into Jack Eichel and some of the other guys too, who could be free agents in 2026. I think just talking about those guys, I mean, McDavid and all that, like, that's a good discussion. Let's hold off on that. We should get to some news that dropped yesterday very quickly. The 5 members of the 2018 Canadian World Junior team who were acquitted in this summer's sexual assault case reinstated by the National Hockey League. If we can, we should go through this pretty quickly. What are you hearing on the latest with that?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting process, right? The league, right after that ruling came out in late July, said that those players remained ineligible at that point in time. And, you get down to a bit of a question of what's right, what's fair. There's going to be varying opinions on that. But I think the league went through a pretty lengthy process to try to arrive at the right place. At the same time, of course, the NHLPA represents the players' rights and, was not going to stand for, I don't believe, I think you could have got into lawsuit territory if the league tried to keep the players' right out for indefinite periods or maybe forever. And so along the way, you get a compromise, and the compromise is what was announced on Thursday evening, which is, these players, my understanding is they can effectively agree to contracts in principle on October 1st. They can officially sign and register those contracts on October 15th. And then in that point in time, obviously they can be living in the city, get the visa process going. If you're a Canadian, say signing with a US team, participate in some degree of team activities. By November 15th, they can join their NHL teams for conditioning and on ice work. And then ultimately December 1st is the earliest any of these players can play in the league this season. And so we should also clarify here, just a quick pause. 4 of the players right now are unrestricted free agents. That being Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, Cal Foote, and help me out, Dylan Dubé. The 5th player, Alex Formanton, his rights are controlled and owned by the Ottawa Senators, the team you cover closely. I'm sure this will be a story you're on top of here as we start to get a little more understanding where things are headed. He's since signed in Switzerland, and so he's playing over there. And he has to sign a deal with the Ottawa Senators by December 1st at 5 p.m. Eastern time in order to be eligible this season. Now, if that doesn't happen, they still retain his rights. It doesn't mean he will or won't be with them in the future. Like, put it this way, his situation is a little more murky, whereas the other players effectively can sign with any team that wishes to sign them. And I do think that there will be considerable interest, particularly in Carter Hart, but also Michael McLeod and Dylan Dubé. Those players have pretty extensive, for younger players, which they were when they ceased playing in the league, extensive NHL resumes. And I do think that there will be a lot of interest in their services. And I would be, at this point, I would say it's highly likely we see those 3 at minimum play NHL games at some point this season.
Okay. Well, as that story continues to develop, we'll continue to cover that here on the CJ Show. And of course, you can look out for our coverage on that at The Athletic. One weird story I saw, well, actually, I know I had to write about it at The Athletic yesterday. Did you see Mark Carney, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, talk about Connor McDavid? And he used the word crisis. And I know the way it started, he was doing a speech at a Liberal Party event in Edmonton yesterday.
Right. He was in Edmonton, which is important to note. Like, he was playing to his audience a little bit in that city.
Yes. It seemed like he was talking about, economics or some sort. And then he goes in on McDavid being unsigned. This is not a transition. This is a rupture. It's in times like these, you have to draw back in and remember what you have. I'm quoting Carney here. Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins. We've got to draw back on those strengths. We got to draw on those values. And just the fact that he made a joke about Connor McDavid and the signing, very fun for us to laugh about, but also a bit of a sign of where things are at here. We have the Prime Minister of Canada saying, Connor McDavid, please stay with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, he sort of,
this is crazy.
It was tongue firmly in cheek, but he's like, Connor, if there's anything you want in the budget, let us know, for the country, not for the Canada actually paying Connor money. But yeah, it was, look at it. I fall somewhere, like, I don't always love, like, politicians in general getting involved in this stuff, but I actually thought he delivered it well. And in this case, Mark Carney is from Edmonton. He is legitimately known as a hockey fan and played hockey for many years. I think he played at Harvard, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Not mistaken.
He was a backup goaltender. I don't know if he played that much, but he was a backup goaltender at Harvard.
Right. Where, fun fact, I believe Peter Chiarelli was among his former colleagues at that time, or teammates rather. So the fact, and look at it, he's been on the ice with the Oilers, if you remember back in the spring. So, I think in this case, there's at least a level of authenticity. I don't think he's just trying to get in on the news of the day. And it is probably a sign. Well, look at the fundamental level, it's a sign of how hockey crazed Canada is, which, we're 2 Canadians living in Canada, so that doesn't surprise us. But if you're a hockey loving fan who's listening to our pod from a corner of the world, like, can you imagine the leader of whatever country you're in weighing in on a hockey matter like in an official capacity? So, I mean, it's a sign of, how close hockey is to a lot of people that live in Canada. And, this is a massive story. I guess, it just, don't miss the obvious here. Like, we know this in our mind, like, you feel it in your gut that when the future of the best player on earth and one of the best players, perhaps of generations, I mean, we'll see where everything nets out over a huge period of time, but you're talking about a Mount Rushmore figure in the league who doesn't have a contract, beyond this season. Of course, it's a massive story. And I'm kind of curious to see how it develops in Edmonton, for, the first day of training camp is a big media day. Generally, usually the best players on every team, plus maybe the GM, plus the coach. I mean, each team does it a little differently, but key figures of the organization speak in the first day or two of training camp in every city in the league. And that's always where the big off-season questions, it sort of blends the off-season to the in-season, right? They start to, like, take shape and everyone has to address them. I mean, I don't know what more Connor can say on this matter, quite frankly. It's my understanding, just for any clarity, nothing's changed on his position. since we've last talked about this. I think McDavid's done a good job of telling you what he needs, like all of us, not just you, Julian. But he's been pretty clear about where he's at, why he's there, that he needs more time. I think everyone ascribes like that there's some giant master plan at play here, and I actually don't at all believe that's the case. I think he just wants to focus on the season as much as he can, wants to see where the Oilers are at, wants to get a feel for the team, and wants more time to make his decision. And so I believe him when he says that, and I really am of the mind that we're not going to see a deal anywhere in the short-term future here, but I suppose that could change any day, because we do know if Connor gets to a point where he's ready to sign a deal, the press release will probably be out within about 12 seconds. So I'm sure they're ready to go on the Oilers end. They're just waiting. They're waiting on Godot here. They're waiting on their superstar. And I think everyone's being respectful of the fact he needs that time, except for Mark Carney, I guess, who's trying to
very patient,
trying to wade in on these matters.
Can't wait to see what the next budget's going to look like. At this point, in terms of hearing from people, I kind of want to hear what Connor's teammates have to say about all this. Like, if you're Leon Draisaitl
in particular, right? If you're identifying one teammate,
1,000%. He's in the first year of that $14 million annual deal we mentioned earlier. What are you thinking? And maybe if he might be, I can understand he might want more money, and he's just thinking about that. He's not thinking about everyone else. But Connor's his boy, and the idea of those two guys not being a thing in the long term, that's something that has to be in his mind.
Right, but he has more info than we do. I'm confident of that. Like he's been part of conversations on a dock or in a dark corner of a pub somewhere, or maybe over in Europe when he was celebrating his wedding and Connor was over there. They had some moments to discuss this, but you can be sure that, I said this on the show last year, but I should remind everyone, when Leon Draisaitl last summer went into his own negotiations, though, the message from McDavid to him was, take care of your own business. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Don't factor that in. So, this is actually really, it's been a years-long conversation for them. But why I'm curious with Leon in particular is because he is a player who doesn't hide his feelings, doesn't back down from questions. I respect it about him. He's a straight shooter. And I'm just curious how straight he wants to shoot, what he wants to shoot at. If he's firing back at the media who are saying, hey, this could be a distraction this year. Like, I'm just curious where he's at. He actually, I saw an Instagram post from him, might've been yesterday, the day before, where he said itching. And it was like a picture of him on the ice. But like, I think it's a good window into his mindset that, I think all those players, like when we actually step back from the McDavid future thing, this is a team that's lost in back-to-back cup finals. Like, that does not happen very often, right? Just because it's so hard to get there. And then it's almost like an odds thing. If you get there multiple years in a row, you're probably going to win one of them, right? I mean, we saw Tampa win 2 in a row, and then they lost the third straight year they made it, against Colorado. I mean, Florida, I guess, lost the first one against Vegas, but now they've won 2 since then. So it is possible to go year after year, but like, I feel like losing in that manner probably only somehow makes you hungrier to win. And I know, look, there's players all around the league in the best shape of their life right now, and they're all hungry to win a Stanley Cup. Just ask them. But I do think when you get that close, it's got to be so tantalizing, every range of emotions. And really what I heard, from my conversations behind the scenes here about the Oilers and the way that this loss sat, is that they were pissed off. Like they felt much farther from winning the 2025 series in 2024. And so I think as emotional and devastating as 2024 was, we all saw the Amazon series, the tears in the dressing room, Zach Hyman speaking up and saying, I know we're going to be back here. Zach was right, by the way. Mm-hmm. And, everything that Connor said and everything we saw from him, it was a different loss this time around. And so I think that group's going to be pretty fired up. And so I wouldn't be surprised if in some way, shape or form, verbally, Leon Draisaitl comes out swinging about anyone saying that this is going to be a distraction or this is going to disrupt the year or what have you. But we'll have to see where his mind's at when he gets a chance to address those questions here in a few days.
I have never been more excited for a Leon Draisaitl media availability in my life after that answer. I have never been more excited.
He's got those intense eyes too, right? It's not even just what he says. It's like how he says it. but look, that's the fire that makes him the player he is, right? I mean, intensity is a common trait around the league. Like Nathan McKinnon, not always the easiest guy to play with, but he's so competitive, so driven. He's pushed himself to the farthest reaches of his sport, and players like that want to win. And I think this sets up as just a fascinating year all around for the Oilers. Obviously the McDavid question is sort of like it's almost like an existential question. It's like, it's to the fundamental core of the organization. What does it mean? Where are they going? But in the short term, they're going to have games to play, and they're trying to atone for getting so close again and not having enough. And I don't know that we could sit here and say they made enough changes in the offseason that you think it's going to come from, it's not going to be this move or that move. Frankly, it's going to be them being just a little bit better as the team they've been, which has been a damn good hockey team, but not quite good enough to win the big one.
Who's a better team on paper right now? Edmonton or Vegas? I keep thinking about Vegas a lot. I mean, obviously with Jack Eichel, and I want to get back to him.
I still
get
actually
Mitch Marner back. I'm curious.
It's close. I lean Edmonton still on that question, but it's not like the gap is so wide that I'm certain. I mean, they obviously played in the playoffs last year. It was probably a closer series on paper, in reality, than it was on paper. Some close games, overtime games, and the like. The one question I have about Vegas is just, how are they going to move forward without Pietrangelo? I mean, adding Mitch Marner is a home run for them, and I think it changes their offense. It changes their power play. It gives them, a look they didn't have. But losing Pietrangelo is not. It's probably, it might not get the same headlines, but I think it's going to be a difficult thing to overcome. Again, there's not another Alex Pietrangelo at the store you can go buy and fill in. So, most teams in this league have some questions, or I don't know if you want to call it a hole, because Vegas still has a bunch of good defenders, but they've taken a body blow while also adding a pretty enticing piece. So I still lean Edmonton, but not by a lot. In terms of which, if you were just choosing one roster to try to win with this season, like, not forget cap situations and futures and all that, if it's just this season, I still probably take Edmonton today.
That makes sense. The two top 5 players in the league on the same roster, and they still have a team that could go all the way to the Cup final. At least I understand that.
And
but
it's
Vegas
two
is still
top
damn
5
good.
players, I'm telling you, that are going to go into like beast mode. Like, contracts aside, nothing to do with that. Like McDavid, I'm telling, the word around Toronto and people in the hockey circles here is that he was an absolute animal this offseason. And no one's ever accused him of cutting corners. Obviously, his greatness is God-given abilities, but it's been the product of really hard work and focus and discipline and all the things that anyone who is excellent at anything, those traits he has. But I heard he went to like another level in terms of how hard he pushed himself this summer. And, I read in the story he did with Mark Spector a week or so ago, like, he openly said, like, I want to score more. You get the feeling, this guy has nothing to prove, let's be clear, but you get the feeling in his mind he has something to prove for some reason. It's obviously a massive season for him. He was one of the most vocal thing he's ever been about in his career, I'd argue, was getting NHL players back to the Olympics and best on best hockey. It was one of the few issues earlier on in his career he was willing to speak out about, and he did it more than once. Well, now he's getting that opportunity. His team's coming off those 2 cup losses. He feels like he owes the city of Edmonton a Stanley Cup. That's part of also what I hear in his comments. And so the only guaranteed season he has left as of this moment is this one in front of us. So I think you're going to see the absolute best in Connor McDavid. I think he made some changes or tweaks where he, with the idea of being his best come June 20th or June 25th or whenever the potential Game 7 of the Cup final has been, because he's played the Game 6 and Game 7 in that series the last 2 years and knows what the grind is. And, I would expect the same from Leon Draisaitl. So the Oilers, look out for the Oilers this year. I'm telling you, there's a fire there.
Oh, for sure. I also think for a guy like Connor McDavid, who, when I hear you say he has nothing more to prove, there's that one thing left for him that we all know he wants to chase. He doesn't want to be a Marcel Dion. We don't want to be I don't think any of us want to see a guy with the talent that he has being put on the pedestal we've put him on, and then at the end of it, he has no Stanley Cup rings to show for it. Maybe a playoff MVP, maybe more, but no cups at the end of it, I mean, that might keep him up at night.
Yeah, and look, in a 32-team league, this is not pursuant to Connor specifically, but you're going to have superstars not win. Like, we almost have to normalize that, because you're right. There was a thought, I grew up a little bit at the end of the 80s into the 90s. It was a 21-team league at one point. You've added 11 franchises since then, and we all know that there's probably at least 2 more coming in the relatively near future here. So you've added, mathematically, all those teams can't win basically in a sporting lifetime. Connor's still got tons of runway. He's on a great team right now. So I wouldn't bet against him winning a cup at some point, obviously, but whether it's him or somebody down the road, it's going to happen again. I think when I think back to that Washington Capitals Stanley Cup in 2018, what made that kind of a special cup is so many people were happy to see Ovechkin win at that time, because you knew he was in that sort of one of the greats conversation. And that was obviously many years before he broke the all-time goals record. At that point, people weren't sure if it would be possible, but you knew he was that kind of player, and they'd been that kind of team. Backstrom, John Carlson, TJ Oshie was nice. They had a lot of, Braden Holtby was one of the top goalies in the league at that point. But I think in a weird way, if you got fans of certain teams or franchises, and then you get people that are kind of in the middle. And if you like a big national story, I mean, that's what we were thinking last year watching the final. If can McDavid win his cup, right? And didn't happen. And now he tries again. That's all you can keep doing, is knock on the door and give yourself those chances.
Can I ask a Jack Eichel question? I know we mentioned him a little bit in the show.
Yeah.
What does a contract extension look like for him? What do you think it will look like?
Well, I think the Golden Knights have a couple things in their favor here. They know he wants to stay, so it's that isn't really under question. They have another player who just signed in Mitch Marner, an 8-year deal at $12 million. So they have sort of a comparable there. Eichel himself is this year playing out the last year of a $10 million contract. So he's getting a raise. We're confident in saying. I think that, there's a slightly, we don't want to open this can of worms, but there just is a different price that top players make in the markets with tax advantages. It's just a fact. I'm not saying that's why those teams, they also tend to have really good GMs and they've made lots of good decisions, and that's why they've won cups. It's not just as simple as this. But if you look at the way the Florida Panthers pay their players, the way Tampa, the contract numbers, they got some of their guys on long-term deals. I'm talking about Hedman's, long deal, and even the more recent one he signed, but Vasilevsky, Point, Kucherov, like all these players made a little less than, had they signed that deal somewhere else. So I think you have to factor that in to Eichel. And so to me, this is based on what I'm hearing a little bit too, is that it's going to probably be in the $13 million to $14 million range. I think that's the right range to focus on. It seems like both sides there are comfortable with an 8-year deal. So, if you're locking in that long and you're Jack Eichel, that's amazing, life-changing money. But you also know that players are going to come along during that 8-year deal if it happens, and many players are going to pass them, right? Because of all the things we talked about on the show, and the fact that we're probably not that far. We're only a couple years from $113 million cap guaranteed. We might not be too far from $130 million cap or $150 million cap if league revenues continue to grow. If the expansion comes along, and those are additive teams to the overall revenue picture for the NHL. So, there's a fine line there to be drawn, but I would say at this point, the sense is he'll come in a little bit above Mitch Marner. I don't know if he gets to the Draisaitl deal, right? That's kind of the range for him, 14 times 8. But I think that basically that's the fair deal. And as I mentioned, I do think that this is one that is likely to get over the finish line in the relatively near future. I'd be surprised if they didn't find a way through the negotiation, but obviously it's a big one for both the team and the player, and there's no particular rush other than it would be nice to start the season knowing you got all that money coming your way.
This episode of the CJ Show is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. Your season, your shot. The NFL season is rolling, and every touchdown can bring you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. From first touchdown score to anytime touchdown props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. If you're looking through the DraftKings Sportsbook lines, the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants playing each other this weekend. Dallas entering as a 4.5 point favorite. New customers, this is for you. Bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus score over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code SDPN. That's code SDPN to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first $5 bet, plus over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-97777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Fees may apply in Illinois. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. NFL Sunday Ticket offer for new subscribers only and auto renews until canceled. Digital games and commercial use excluded. Restrictions apply. Additional NFL Sunday Ticket terms at youtube.com/go/NFL Sunday Ticket/terms. Limited time offer. One other thing on Vegas too. How do you think this team, with all the people who have been running the organization as well as they have, as aggressive as they've been, how do you think they'll fare in this new CBA era with a playoff salary cap and no more LTIR shenanigans, the target firmly being put on their back as a team where they've used that LTIR loophole to their advantage before, and basically fans are waiting for them to kind of fail now that the playing field has been evened out for everybody.
Well, they might be waiting for a while. I would never bet against the Vegas Golden Knights. Honestly, they really have just a smart, well-run team. They have an owner in Bill Foley who desperately wants to win again. So right from the top of the organization, the message is clear that do whatever it takes to win. And they have a proven track record of being aggressive, of when maybe it doesn't work out all the time. They've moved on from players that they've signed to reasonably big contracts. They make big trades, it feels like, every season, even that they went out and got Eichel, right? I mean, that wasn't a slam dunk move at the time. That wasn't completely obvious. He was dealing with a serious neck issue. The Sabres wanted him to get a specific kind of surgery. He wanted to try something that some teams, and the Sabres specifically, thought was too experimental or too uncertain for, a player that they had that much money committed to. They went and made that trade, and it's paid off. Eichel, first of all, had a fantastic season last year, but was a huge part of them winning the Stanley Cup. I believe he was second in Conn Smythe Trophy voting that playoffs to Jonathan Marchessault. So, we sit in this league where we always say things like, oh, you can't get a first line center or, elite defenseman.
They don't grow on trees. That's what a lot of people say.
But then Vegas, they act in a way that they do. I mean, look, they also made the Thomas Hertl deal. If you remember that was 2 trade deadlines ago. Now, Thomas Hertl had been hurt most of that season or had been hurt leading into that deadline specifically. Yeah. And nobody saw that trade coming. Like there was no rumors of it. I didn't, I deal in kind of the gossip game. I hadn't heard about that at that time. And they went out and, the Sharks and Golden Knights, let's not forget, had a pretty heated rivalry when Vegas entered the league. They had those crazy playoff game with the comeback and everything, but they went out and made that trade inside their division to get another player who can play center. Now, my point being is that I just don't expect them to slow down. I don't think they're going to stop. I think they're going to maximize their position to the cap. And so, all great teams or great dynasties, great runs. I know they're not a true dynasty in the official spirit of that word, but they've been such a top team for so long. That can't last forever, especially in a cap world. I think eventually the check comes due, but I don't think we're there yet in Vegas. Just also so many players want to play there, right? I mean, they've made that an attractive destination for players who have the ability to control their fates, right? Noah Hannafin traded there and signed. Obviously, Mitch Marner ultimately, his agent Darren Ferris did a podcast recently, said if it was up to him, he wanted to go to July 1st. He wanted all the teams lined up at his door. He wanted to turn it into kind of a circus. And Mitch Marner said, no, I want to go play one place. That's Vegas. So Vegas also has a tremendous appeal to players, which for all kinds of reasons that are more than just tax or more than just the strip or more than just the weather, the nice golf you can play on the off days, although all those things certainly help. But I think it's also a place that players know there's a winning culture and that the organization, even if it has a year that isn't to their liking, they're just going to double down. Like they're going to keep, it's so, when you talk about the Golden Knights, I don't know why I get into like all these casino references. Like all of a sudden I'm going to be like making blackjack references here. I try not to be cheesy, but
kind of just opens itself up to that.
I don't know why my brain goes there, but it's like, yeah, they're going to keep doubling down. They're going to they're not getting up from the table. And look, having been on the wrong end of some blackjack nights at a casino, not always the smartest thing to do. This is a younger me. This is a less experienced me. In fact, when I go to Vegas nowadays, I don't even go near the casino. Like I'm kind of over the whole thing. Never. Not, wow. I mean, but when Vegas first started being an NHL road trip, even like when they took the award show there 10 or 12 years ago, back in those days, it was sort of novel that was, you'd be going there for work. So me and some other unnamed colleagues certainly, had some good days at the table too. It wasn't all bad. Anyway, point is doubling down doesn't always work, but it's worked for the Golden Knights. And I think it's going to keep working for the foreseeable future.
I had one night in, I don't even remember what casino it was in Vegas where I was at a blackjack table. I basically needed help and I came out of it okay. That's the first and last time I will ever do that in Vegas. I do not trust myself at these tables. I barely know what I'm doing. But I came out of it okay.
I got to tell you, the greatest thing that ever happened to me in Vegas.
Tell me.
It happened at a craps table. Now, I don't understand the game craps. I understand the high level of it, but there's a lot of specific bets on the table I don't really understand. And it was a colleague's milestone birthday, and he was guilting me. He's like, CJ, you got to come out with me tonight. Like you can't go to, because I actually at that point of that specific trip, I was over Vegas. And I think I probably had some bad times at the time. Like, I was just like, I don't even want to spend any more money. I was down to my last $10. It's a true story.
Oh my God.
And I told myself mentally, I'm like, I'm not going back to the ATM. Cause like, you're just invited, at a certain point you do have to cut your losses. Right. And I made one bet on the table. I actually asked him like, what should I do? Cause like $10 on a craps table doesn't get you too far. And I'm like, what, if I'm making one $10 bet, like where should I go? And he pointed me to kind of the area of the table. And I bet on, it had to be 2 4s rolled, not 8, had to be 2 4s. And that hit and it paid 13-1. So I got $130 from that $10 bet. And then I just mirrored my colleagues' bets. And it was one of these tables where no one rolled a 7 for like literally 45 minutes. And oh my God. I was walking with a limp, all the cash in my pocket when I left there. And I'll tell you, when that ended, like, this is where I do sometimes have some good thoughts. I was like, I'm done. Like I was like, no more gambling. Yeah. Like we just like that. I just rode lightning there. Like I was Evil Knievel or something, standing on a motorbike and I somehow survived it. So I was like, I'm going to bed.
I'm just picturing you when you say limping out of the casino, just like, yeah, money bag CJ over here.
But you know what? People only tell you about their wins. I'm not telling you about the nights I've lost, but that was by far my greatest win. I actually remember when it was the 2016, the award show was in Vegas, and I was going to the draft in Buffalo the next morning, and that's where the Leafs had the #1 pick for Austin Matthews. But it was the night before the going to Buffalo, and I was like, I got like an early flight, and I got to leave here. I got to get out of here with this money.
Oh my God. Okay, I got one last thing.
Sorry for story time. I don't know even where that came
Why
from.
Are you apologizing for story time? People come to the podcast for story time. Don't stop apologizing for that. We are on season 5 of this damn show, which I love, dear to and close to my heart. I have never once heard you tell a story where I'm like, geez, man, stop telling this damn story. Please stop apologizing for it.
I've actually got one more quick summer story, and this one's much
Please
quicker.
do it. Please do it.
I was out to dinner this summer with some friends, like a group at a table, and, eating dinner on a patio, July in Toronto, life's good, not thinking anyone. I didn't, sometimes, must feel this too. Like sometimes I can notice someone noticing me, like it's like a hockey fan, but I didn't even notice anyone noticing me. And at one point after our food came, the waiter comes over, it was a different waiter than the person serving us. And he just says, almost looked like a manager or something, right? At the restaurant. Mm-hmm. He's like, everything okay here? everything good with your meals? And everyone's like, yeah, great. Thank you. And he goes, is it better than a beer at the Saddle Dome or something? He made some reference. He made some reference to that story about me and the gummies and the Saddle Dome. And I literally like, it was hilarious. And only one other player, or one other person at the table, my partner, knew what was going on, like understood the reference. And I was like, wow, that guy is like, he's a real OG of the show. Cause I told that story like 4 years ago and he just played it so cool. And then I didn't see him again. Like that was all he said. It was actually ice. Like I loved the way he handled it was actually hilarious. So
that's like season 1.
Yeah, thank you, whoever you are. I never even got to we never even had a chat after that. He just dropped that line and then dropped his mic and walked off.
Dog, I think if memory serves, you told that story the very first time we ever did an episode in person in like Adam Wild's basement.
In Adam Wild's basement, I remember because in my mind I'm like, is it bad to tell this story or whatever? I don't know.
No, it was a great story.
I'm much more comfortable now. I'll just tell you anything that's going on. But like, I was new to the podcast game, and I was like, "Is this going to dog me?" And it hasn't dogged me. Honestly, maybe no one's listening that's professional, but no one's even brought that up to me, like in the professional world, and be like, "What? You experimented with all these like weed gummies and went to a hockey game and tripped out?"
Oh no!
but only people like that, like almost like sort of the more personal interactions with fans, and they appreciate it. Do you know what's funny? This is the 17th story. I was just in Calgary like last week for the Olympic camp, and my friend, who was the enabler, was there again. He's like, "Hey, do you want something of this?" I was like, "No chance."
Oh no,
like nothing. I 100% abstained. Like I learned my lesson all those years ago at the Saddle Dome.
Oh my God, I miss the Saddle Dome. I just want that said. But now every time I look at the Saddle Dome, now I'm just gonna think, this is where CJ got messed up.
I know. I actually love that it happened there. It's kind of an iconic stadium. Like I realize it definitely needs replaced. I understand why but I'll be sentimental for the Saddle Dome when it's gone, just because it's kind of a rugged building in a lot of ways.
Did you ever walk the catwalk when you were there?
Oh yeah. It scared the crap out of me.
I don't know if I've ever told this story. I realize we're getting into story time.
Yeah,
There's one more topic I want to get to. This is the last story, and then I'll get to it. There was a time when I was at the Saddle Dome, and a former NHL player was like walking, like he was on one part of the catwalk where like the media normally sits, and he was working the broadcast that night. And he's asking me like, "Hey, where am I supposed to go to like sit in a booth, like to do my thing?" And I'm like, "You got to go to the other side, my man." And he's like, Are you serious? Like, yeah, you got to go. And he's like, "Can you walk with me to the other side?" I walked with this dude on that catwalk, like how many feet up in the air to the other side where they were able to do their
basically at
business.
the roof over top of the scoreboard, walking to the other side of the rink. Like it is crazy.
Yeah. And like, this isn't somebody who, maybe played like one game. I'm not going to say who they are. This is someone that like people know. Like they've won before. Like, who they are.
Here's the thing. Well, anyone usually on a team's broadcast, generally speaking, had some degree of notoriety as a player.
Yes.
Even without knowing who that person is, they probably didn't even know that existed because they probably just played every game at the South. Like they're probably never a healthy scratch at the Saddle Dome. So they probably had no idea that's like what the press box situation is. It's frightening. I'm not a good heights person, so that's not my favorite press box, although it's a great view of the game. So I mean, yes. the counterbalance to it being a little bit nerve wracking, and you escorting someone to the booth is you got a great view of the ice when you're up there.
1,000%. Okay, story time. We're tabling story time for
we're still
Monday.
Kind of in summer mode. We can get away with a little bit of fat.
We can absolutely do that. And I know there have been people asking like, "Hey, when's Ask CJ coming back?" That's also another window for us to do that. We'll bring that back on Monday.
Perfect.
I wanted to know your thoughts, CJ, on an article that a colleague of ours, Josh Yohe, we both love Josh, great dude. He wrote this yesterday. I'm just going to give you the headline. Trading Sidney Crosby could make sense for the Penguins and the superstar. I just still can't believe we've reached this point off of what Pat Brisson said earlier this week. We talked about it on our last episode. You can go back to it if you need to. But like, I saw people putting up like mock trades between the Canadians and the Pens. Like, I don't know. Like this is a bit weird for me. to be at this point.
Yeah. Do you know what I thought? I was up early on Thursday and I saw that article like with my morning coffee.
Yeah.
And I was like, vindication.
Oh my God.
This is vindication.
That's what you thought.
For those of us at the CJ show. Only because, I won't, because all we've ever said on the show, frankly, is that the conversation should be happening. That was it. We weren't saying ever Sidney Crosby is going to get traded to this team on this day. Like, it was more that this should be a conversation. And the reaction we got often from Penguins fans was like, this is never going to be a conversation. You guys are just stirring it up, looking for stories. And if Josh came to this, Josh crossed the Rubicon with that story. Josh, excellent local reporter. I've known him for a long, long time there. And, but he's often been of the mind that there's this zero chance this could happen. He actually has a headline where he called it baseless, trade rumors back in January, whatever. So the fact that Josh is there, that tells you it's almost like the tides are turning a little bit. And the funny part about the story and the timing of it is I really don't expect anything to happen anytime soon. So we almost have to like indulge in this right now, put it in our back pockets, and then let's see where the Penguins are come the trade deadline, or even maybe a bit before that. Although, let me introduce one dynamic we haven't discussed.
Okay.
It was a quiet summer, right? We've been over this.
It sure was.
It was a quiet summer in the NHL. One of the main reasons for that is nobody was trying to be bad. Like no team was openly like, we're rebuilding, we're trading away players. There wasn't a lot in that time frame. Well, there's a pretty intriguing prospect named Gavin McKenna. Was going to Penn State this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's a number one, rated prospect by Corey Pronman and Scott Wheeler and everyone who does this for a living. I'm certainly no prospect wizard or expert.
He's pretty damn good. I saw him at the World Juniors. He's pretty damn good.
Yeah. Like my point is like I think he's the kind of player, and I don't want to put any more expectations up, but he changes an organization. Like you're feeling better about your team if you get him. Who is going to be bad in November or December? Like someone. Here's the thing: no one was. No, but I'm not just
sure.
saying. But I'm not just saying Pittsburgh. I'm just trying to.
Right.
I'm floating a larger theory here, but I think it ties in with where I wanted to get to. Is that some teams? There's not enough points available for everybody to be good. So some team is going to find themselves bad or off to a terrible start in November or December. And I think there's going to be incentive for that team or maybe a small grouping of teams to get a jump start on, maybe making some trades, maybe, thinking about what they could do to position themselves to be in the best spot for that 2026 draft. And I just wonder, is there a scenario where Pittsburgh gets there? And if it does that offer a window? I mean, Sidney Crosby, it's hard to imagine him being an in-season trade, but I don't think we can rule anything out at this point. I mean, at the end of the day, for all my talk of vindication, this or that, I mean, one of the most powerful agents, if not the most powerful agent in hockey, who happens to represent Sidney's represented him for 25 years, like back to before he was even in the NHL, came out and said that he could be traded. It's possible, or whatever his exact quote was. So it's now possible. It's being discussed. People like Josh think it could happen. Let's see where we go. I didn't think we'd get here in like early September. I thought trade deadline time or even next summer. But the world has come around to the conversation we've been having here on the CJ show for at least 12 months, maybe longer. And we're going to keep having it because I think we were right then. I don't think anything's really changed except more and more people are coming to the realization. I think, at the end of the day, it's unique circumstance for all kinds of reasons. And maybe, just maybe, it happens.
I'm also intrigued at the idea that the November-December period could serve as a pre-trade deadline to the actual trade deadline, especially for all of us start for content and for moves to be made. I have no problem with like a Black Friday trade deadline style time.
And I don't know what it looks like. I just want to say that I believe some teams are going to have to, earlier than maybe normal, they're going to have to get honest about where they're at. And they actually should get excited about, wanting to position themselves for the 2026 draft, which means something that looks like a rebuild or trading some core pieces away. I don't know what team it's going to be or which grouping of teams yet, because we got to see some games played. But I could see it. I think we might get trade activity of some meaningful caliber in the early to middle part of the season. And then really, we just got to see what Sidney Crosby wants to do. Much like 97 in Edmonton, 87 in Pittsburgh drives the bus on whatever happens here.
Before we wrap up, this just dropping, the Pittsburgh Penguins have signed goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury to a professional tryout contract. That literally just dropped.
Wow.
Yep. Alan Walsh had been teasing something like this on Twitter, on X. He was teasing it. Something was going to come. And, well, Marc-Andre Fleury's back. Wow.
I thought he was working with the Minnesota Wild. Like in a position with the team.
Maybe he might have been, but the Pittsburgh Penguins, this is just verbatim off their website.
I mean, look at
on a PTO deal. He will join the Penguins for practice on Friday, September 26th, before suiting up to play in parts of Pittsburgh's exhibition game against Columbus on Saturday, September 27th. This may just feel like a glorified goodbye in this case, but still interesting.
It is interesting because Marc-Andre Fleury didn't just retire. Like, he went to the World Championship and played for Canada too.
Mm-hmm.
So, man. I mean,
it's supposed to be an autograph night too, right? Like,
I love the nostalgia of it, but I guess it's hard because we're doing a show and we're supposed to tell you what's going on. And I don't know if this is just, like you say, a goodbye or if he truly is trying to make the team. I'm not sure what this is. I mean, either way, good for Mark, and I think it'll be fun. Like, even if it is just a fun thing, but did not have that on the bingo card for September 12th.
I wondered why Alan Walsh was quote tweeting a photo of Marc-Andre Fleury in Pittsburgh Penguins garb. I wondered about that. And now we have our answer as we wrap up CJ show. That was, we were done, and then that story popped. So yeah,
it bookended the Crosby talk. It actually
was a great end to that.
It wasn't a hard left like usual. It was actually just a smooth little turn there from our fearless host.
Absolutely. I have like a 50% rate. Some people still think I talk too much on the show. We'll be back on Monday.
Get out of the comments, buddy. Just get out of there.
But here's the thing. I don't hide in the comments. Literally, I'll just mind my business, and then I'll accidentally see my name on Reddit. I promise I'm not in the comments. I promise I'm not. It doesn't matter.
This is where it is good to be a little older. And I know you love when I call myself old, but I'm so blissfully unaware of anything. I don't even look at Reddit. I realize there's reason to. I'm not hating on it. I'm just completely unaware of what goes on out there.
Producer Drew is trying to call us out in our little mini chat saying, calling me out for saying accidentally on Reddit. It is very possible to come across yourself accidentally on Reddit. I don't go on Reddit, but a Google search could lead to that. I'm just saying.
If I go on Reddit, could I just search my name and see everything everyone's saying?
Oh yeah, you could see stories you've posted. I don't know if you want to do that, or maybe you have the stomach for it. But yeah, you'll find a lot of thoughts about you at the show there.
Whenever we get to a quiet part of the season, I think we do that
on the show.
God. We just live do it. We don't pre-script anything. We just go do it.
Mean things. Do you want to just mean things or just anything said about?
I don't know.
Us?
We can work on it, but I think that could be a fun segment. It could be fun.
I think that actually, now that I think about it, the more I think about it, that could actually be a really fun idea.
Yeah.
All right, we'll table that for November, December if we don't get a pre-trade deadline. In the meantime,
or we could do it a Christmas episode or something when we're trying to get some time off with our families. But
Christmas meme
Merry
posts.
Christmas. CJ's an idiot.
Oh man, I love that. Let's table that for Christmas. Get your questions in, not necessarily on Reddit, but for us on X or Discord or Blue Sky if you're there. We will bring back Ask CJ on Monday. I'm warning you now, CJ. There are people who have questions about the Toronto Blue Jays and the Dallas Cowboys. So prepare yourself on Monday for those questions.
Well, the Cowboys are going to be 1-1 by Monday.
Okay.
And I still haven't gone to a Jays game, so.
Which is amazing to me that you haven't done that. That's discipline.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not across the finish line yet, Julian. The games are only getting bigger, and they had a great one yesterday, from what I understand. But
so like if when they make the playoffs, you're still not going to go.
I can't say that for sure. But I mean, I've not been watching, so I'm wrong here too. Let the record show I'm wrong, but we'll get into that on Monday.
All right. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you all on Monday. Peace.